I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and it is my privilege to introduce the first edition of Coast to Coast with Alan Blumkin and Bill Hall. Alan is here and Bill is here.
Hey,
How are you, Alan?
Bill.
And Bill. All right. Take it away, guys.
Bill, before we start, I want you to know something, and I don't want you to put this on the Boys of Summer group, because in those days when I was a kid, I was a very big Yankee fan. I hated the Dodgers with a passion. But that's 60 years, 60 or more years ago already. Things have changed somewhat.
Well, that is good to hear. So when you were a young man, you were kind of like Paul Simon. I recently read a book about Paul Simon, you know, the singer of Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah. And, of course, he grew up in Queens as a passionate Yankee fan. And I guess one time when he was a little boy, about 7, 8 years old, 1949 or so, his father took him to a game at Ebbets Field, and he wanted to go in disguise so none of his fans would know that he had committed the terrible transgression of going to Ebbets Field.
Well, I grew up in Queens, and I was originally from the Bronx, and everybody where I grew up, all the kids were from either the Bronx or Brooklyn. So you're either any person who proclaimed to be a Giants fan we called chicken.
Yeah, I was going to say, where did the Giants fan base come from? Just
not where I grew up, that's for sure.
No.
And so it was the Yankees and Dodgers. We used to bet quarters on World Series games, and I wanted the Dodgers to win just so the Yankees could beat them in the World Series.
Yeah.
I used to argue that Joe Collins was better than Gil Hodges, no matter how ridiculous it was.
Even though
the Dodger. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Even though Gil might have out-hit Joe Collins by 40 or 50
you look back
points.
At that, of course, that whole argument is totally ludicrous.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, Rizzuto versus Reese, maybe there you've got an argument, although I'd go with Pee Wee myself.
Were you from this area originally?
No, I'm not. Here's the story. Just the other day, in a message exchange on Facebook, Lyle Spatz basically asked me, how does a guy from Oregon become such a passionate Brooklyn Dodger fan? Well, we got to go back to that miracle summer, 1969. I was a young man really following baseball passionately for the first time. That was one of the two great miracles, of course, the Miracle Mets, and then the other was a couple of guys walking around on the moon. But that was the summer I fell deeply in love with baseball and the Mets and started learning about their manager, Gil Hodges, and somehow that led me down the path of wanting to know about the history of baseball. And then about 3 years later, I think, The Boys of Summer came out. I read that, and that was the beginning of a lifelong love affair with the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Wow.
May
I interrupt and ask Bill for an update on the possibility of Gil getting into the Hall someday, and if anything he sees as positive on the horizon?
Well, I hate to do crystal ball gazing because there have been so many disappointments through the years. The last time Gil was eligible was 2014 with the Golden Era Committee, and if they had continued that 3-year rotation for considering people from different eras of baseball, then he would have been up again this year. Well, they've restructured, broken it up into more committees, and the bad thing is he doesn't even come up for potential consideration again now until the year 2020. But we're looking at a smaller time span than the Golden Era Committee, so, fewer competitors. So maybe that works to his advantage, but unfortunately, given the realities of the Hall of Fame, I don't feel great about making any kind of a forecast.
Okay. very good answer.
Am I sounding like a politician, which is my day job?
Tell me about how a nice, honest guy gets into politics. That'll be my last question. You guys can take it away.
Okay, what's the short answer? I started out as a reporter, and I had been a reporter for about 25 years, and then a county commissioner I had covered during her entire career, really respected, really liked. Told me she was going to be retiring the following year, and said, you've been watching us do this job for a long time. How about you doing it yourself? So I said, well, why not? And so I've been doing it for 12 years now. This is year number 13, and we'll see what happens.
Is it a full-time gig?
It is, yeah. Our county and most of the, there's like more than 3,000 counties in this country, and you'll find different models, different structures, from state to state, and even in different size counties around the state. But in most counties in Oregon, it's 3 full-time people, kind of setting policy and also managing operations of the county.
Now, we're looking at 4 sets of government, basically. We're looking at federal government, we're looking at state, we're looking at county, and we're looking at city. Does that seem like an awful lot of fluff if we were going to revamp things, or are there things that work and don't work about that system?
Well, that's an interesting question, and we could do a whole radio show about that, but frankly, government, when people tell me government isn't efficient, I say in a lot of ways it's designed not to be efficient, that you can't move it too quickly. If we consolidated structures, if we consolidated authority, no doubt we could get things done quicker, but in a lot of ways, but I think you'd lose local accountability because people, if they've got an issue with their pothole not being fixed or the health clinic not offering a service they think it ought to offer, they know how to find me. They know how to get a hold of me. And, you got to also think about the fact that we got people all across the political spectrum, from farthest left to farthest right, and the checks and balances in our government, I think, at least in theory, should make sure that everybody has a chance to have their voice heard. But the price for that is a lack of efficiency sometimes.
Okay.
So
take it, guys. Do your thing.
Okay, Bill. I just want to let you know my background. I started my first year of interest when I was 8 years old in 1951, which happens to be one of the marquee seasons in New York between the Dodgers and Giants in the National League and the Yankees in the American League, and I became interested through the cards. Baseball
Cardinals cards. Or baseball cards?
Baseball cards.
Yeah.
And when I was 10, my parents bought me the first edition of the Turkin Thompson Encyclopedia.
Oh.
And I feel lucky because when I was a kid, I had a lot less to remember.
Yeah, there weren't so many years, so many
Babe Ruth and Tyko, those players were not all that far away. So, the interest just became very, very, more and more terrific over the years. And, I developed a whole bunch of, interests other than the Yankees. And I joined SABR in 1974. I was one of the first 200 to join that, and I won as a playing individual and playing team 7 championship trivia trophies over the years. I stopped playing in after 1999. I wrote a few of the national contests. So I follow all aspects, and to me, at times the off-field stuff is just as fascinating as the on-field stuff.
Oh, very much so. And for the folks listening who haven't heard of SABR, we ought to tell them that is SABR, Society for American Baseball Research. And I've been a member for a long time, but I can't claim a pedigree as long as yours. I think I joined up about 1985 or 1986. Been a dues-paying member all these years and enjoyed all the publications and access to the online resources, but really haven't been active in the organization otherwise, although that is starting to change. I signed up for the biography project, and you know, one of the many wonderful things about SABR is that it's building a biographical encyclopedia of every man who's ever played baseball. And not too long ago, I discovered that two of the boys this summer have not been subject to biographies yet. So I signed up and am now working on putting together life stories for Billy Cox and George Shotgun Shuba. Any memories or thoughts on those guys?
Oh, yeah. When you put up the Boys of Summer site, the pictures of Billy Cox, I commented on one of the crazy things is that when Topps in 1995 put out a Brooklyn Dodger commemorative set, and they created 1953 cards for the players who were not in that original set, and one of them was Billy Cox. They have on the bottom Billy Cox pitcher.
Oh, really?
Ridiculous. And you turn the card in the back, they have all the batting statistics like you would expect. But when I saw that, I wound up getting the Cox cards, and I remember him, as a third baseman they got from the Pirates. In a steal, they stole him and Preacher Row for a washed-up Dixie Walker and two pitchers, I think, were Hal Gregg and Vic Lombardi. And Casey Stengel once said that's after one of the World Series, he said, that ain't a third baseman, that's an acrobat. He supposedly told Brooks Robinson, he says, you're the second best third baseman I ever saw. And Robinson said to him, who's the best? He says, number 3 in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I wish I could have seen Billy in action. I mean, I love the descriptions, that the way he would get the ball, and unlike every other infielder, he just wouldn't come up with the ball and fire it over to Gil Hodges at first. He would very carefully, how did, like one broadcaster said, Billy up with the ball, he checks it to see if it's broken and fires over to Hodges at first. And I mean, really, the hesitation. Where did one story I recently came across was Pee-wee right next to him in the infield there would be screaming, "Throw the damn ball, Billy!" But that was part of his technique.
Yeah, I know.
May I ask, Alan, how you mentioned Brooks Robinson, and you mentioned, of course, talking about Billy Cox defensively. I was too young at the time to appreciate Billy Cox in any way. I was born in 1946. But may I ask how he ranks in terms against, say, Clete Boyer, who was the best third baseman, I thought, of my time, and how Boyer ranks against Robinson as well. I think Clete Boyer was just as good, but as Robinson. But I want Alan's opinion on this.
Well, it's very, very hard to measure that kind of thing. All of them, you can throw Ken Boyer and Greg Nettles into the mix defensively.
No question.
They had range. They had the ability to dive. I was at the World Series game in 1978, the third game at Yankee Stadium. Greg Nettles literally saved the game for Ryan Guidry. Made a number of stops during the game. I find it very, very hard to compare people like that because you basically become prejudiced to who you've seen the most.
Right, yeah. And that's how it was, I guess, with me. Having seen Boyer, the Giants were gone.
One of the stories with Billy Cox is when the Dodgers in 1953, they sold Andy Pafko to the Braves to make room to bring Gilliam up. They tried to put Jackie Robinson at third base initially. And Robinson, for whatever reason, wasn't working out too well. And they benched Cox for Jackie Robinson. They put Cox in there, back in there. They put Jackie Robinson out in left field.
Right.
Which is where he spent most of his career after that, playing for the Dodgers. So Cox was a very, very important cog in the early parts of the Dodger run from 49 through 56.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they got him from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Who did they trade him to? I guess that trading him made way for Don Hoke.
No, they traded him. They sold him, and I believe, Bill can correct me on this, after the 1954 season into 1955, they sold Billy Cox and Preacher Rowe to the Orioles.
Correct. And Preacher Rowe retired.
Billy Cox played about 50 games for the Orioles, and then they tried to deal with Cleveland, and he retired.
Yep, that was when he said.
Preacher Rowe never pitched an inning for the Orioles. He decided to retire rather than go there.
Right. Cox, at the time of the trade, he said he had no bitterness to the Dodgers. He wanted a chance to play every day. Baltimore gave him that, but when they traded him to Cleveland, and Cleveland, was the defending American League champions, and they were trying to strengthen themselves. They were in third place at that point, trying to overtake the Yankees, and they thought, the deal was to bring Billy Cox and Gene Woodling to Cleveland, so Woodling went, but Cox was batting in the 220s and basically said, his legs were swollen, he had a hernia, and that even though he was only 35 years old, he was physically shot. He was done. He said he'd rather walk away than not be able to perform at his best.
Oh, he had stamina problems because I believe he contracted malaria in East Asia during World War II.
Correct. Yeah, and he had flare-ups for years afterwards. After he came home, before the war, he was like a solid but skinny. He was like 5'8", 150 pounds, and he was originally property of the Pirates, and they were talking about hoping that he could gain 20 pounds. Instead, he struggled to stay at 150, and they said that when he'd have a malaria flare-up, his weight would drop into the 130s, and at that point, he looked pretty skeletal. And so with the pounding
when we think of these players in the 50s, we have to remember that most of these guys had a lot of wartime experience. When I say experience, I'm not talking baseball-wise. A lot of wartime, real war, battles and stuff that tore their bodies apart physically, and career would have been if they didn't have to spend time in the military. Ted Williams notwithstanding, he's the guy that comes to mind. But a lot of these guys were, young guys and turned into grizzled veterans before their time, given World War II.
Yeah, can I share a little bit more about Billy Cox's military experience? Because I've been really delving deeply into his life, and I found it fascinating. He played Class B ball with Harrisburg of the Interstate League, 1940 and 41. Pittsburgh was actually Pie Traynor, the Hall of Fame third baseman, scouted him for the Pirates. They paid $20,000 for him, which was believed at the time to be a record sum paid for the contract of a Class B player. They brought him up to the Pirates in September of 41, moved another Hall of Famer over, Archie Vaughn, the shortstop, moved him over to third base and played Billy at shortstop, and they were impressed enough that Frankie Frisch, who was managing the Pirates, said that was probably going to be his 1942 lineup. And then, boom, of course, Pearl Harbor got bombed. We went into the war. Billy was drafted, and he spent most of 1952 at the Army Induction Center in... pardon me?
You said 1950 to 1942.
I'm sorry, 42. Yeah, correct. Thank you. And, stateside still in Pennsylvania. But then in 43, 44, 45, he was overseas with the Signal Corps. Now, Signal Corps was not a combat unit, but they went in right behind and with the combat units, basically stringing wires, setting up field communication for Army units, and they were right in the thick of the shelling. I mean, after the war, he told one of his teammates, no, he never got wounded, but shell went off close enough to him to blow his helmet off, so that's being in the thick of things. And, just like most of the guys in those days, nobody ever heard the term PTSD, but there was shell shock, battle shock. They said one day the Pirates, this is after Billy was back in 46 or 47, they're playing at Braves Field in Boston, and a fireworks display starts, and, the sound of the explosions, Billy dove under the bench in the dugout. Just a reflexive thing.
Oh, wow.
Well, he wasn't a known major league ball player at that stage when he was in the war, and a lot of the ones who were not known major leaguers did go into active duty. Most of the established major leaguers during World War II, an awful lot of them, all they did with the Army was play ball. But they took almost everybody. They took Pete Reiser, who by all standards should have been a 4F for the military, and they kept him in for 3 years so he could play ball on one of the military teams.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I read this a while back that finally it got to the point where somebody, complained for him, and they examined him and they discharged him right away. But this is a man that never should have been there in the first place.
Exactly.
But the Coxes and the Spahns and the Berras and all these players who had very limited or no major league experience, when they went into the military in those years, they actually served, in action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing I just came across recently, they said of all the Pirates roster, nobody served more time in the military during that war than Billy Cox.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, so just imagine if he had had those 4 seasons back, imagine if
he'd had his health back.
And had his health back, you can very strongly, I think, make a case for a Hall of Fame career instead of merely an outstanding career for Billy Cox.
I want to interject something. You mentioned
Sure.
PTSD, which is the common phrase now. 10 years ago, we never heard of it. But when I was a kid and people would come back from the service, Korea mostly, my memories, the expression was "Neuvis from the service."
Oh, yeah.
Somebody was just a little touched from their wartime experience. I remember my grandmother using that expression. He's nervous from the service. So it's a little more sophisticated now. But it was wonderful how it took the veteran committee, whatever it is, the Veterans Association, to even put a name to PTSD, to even identify it. It was like Agent Orange. You had a, if you were a veteran suffering, you had to just suffer and apply for benefits and apply for treatment, and they were denying everything. It was a terrible disgrace what this country has treated their veterans.
I think one of the reasons that it's come to the forefront is because when the W started our little adventure in Iraq, there was no draft. Because if there had been a draft, there would have been like Vietnam. There would have been riots in the streets for that. And since the people in the services were going there 3 and 4 times, there was a movie that came out a couple of years ago called Hurt Locker. About the lead actor is playing a member of the bomb disposal unit. And he goes through all these harrowing things. Then he goes back home to his wife and kid and finds that he can't live without the excitement, so he re-ups and goes back there.
Wow.
And that's the way the movie ends. But because they're doing repeated tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they see things probably which is hopefully we'll never see in our lives, or haven't seen in our lives, that anytime there's, like you said, anytime a firecracker goes off, it brings back memories of what it was like in combat. And you go there 3 or 4 times, and you think you're lucky because you've survived all of this, and then they send you back again. It can get apparently get very, very very, very bad.
Yeah, I disagree with you on something, Alan. You mentioned there was no draft. I contend there was a draft, and it was an economic draft. And I'll say no more. That kids were forced in because they couldn't get jobs out of high school and college, and either the reserves, you start out in the reserves, and then they send your unit over there. Kids, the economy was so bad, and I thought
I was in the reserves during Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the function.
No, I'm talking about Iraq.
The function of the unit I was in, they had tried once during Korea, and it was a disaster. So we all know that there's no way in heck we'd ever be called up. Because, and then in those days, when they asked you when you were in formation, what's your emergency meeting place, and everybody would yell out Toronto.
Oh, wow.
That's,
yeah, I did 6 years from 1968 to 1974 in the Army Reserve. I was very lucky.
Well, when you mentioned Toronto, I must note that my son's uncle, Diane Sattin's brother, Mark Sattin, who is in his own right a genius, went to Canada and formed the anti-draft tunnel and the movement, and wrote a book about it. He wrote the first draft-resisting book back in those days, and it took him a long time to finally get back in the country, but he chose that way of resisting, and everybody does things differently. I remember the day that the letter arrived from Uncle Sam saying, "Come down for a physical," and I was having trouble matriculating into any college, and I ended up joining the Air Force to avoid the khaki and the combat experience, and I get to spend time in California as opposed to Vietnam. But the feeling in my stomach when that letter came to come down for a physical, and as Muhammad Ali said, I don't have anything again. No Vietnam. He's ever called me a nigger, that kind of thing. He had no grudge, and neither did I. I had no idea what Vietnam was, and I wasn't angry at anybody. So why would I want to go to war in the first place? But That's another story. How did your military career go, or didn't, Bill Hall?
I did not go. I, had very bad vision, and just I'm pretty sure if I had ever tried, I would not have been able to enlist. I just wasn't temperamentally inclined that way, even though I did come from a long line of service members. My father saw combat with U.S. Marines in the Pacific in World War II. His father was with the Marines in France in World War I. My other grandfather was in the Navy right after World War I, but it just wasn't a path for me.
Well, everybody's different. Did you get any flack from your family at all?
No, actually, my father said in part that he served in hopes that I wouldn't have to if I didn't want to or need to. And so, he realized I was my own man, even though he was very proud of his service, and I have tremendous respect for him, but, that just wasn't my path, my way.
Alan, was your family understanding of your decisions? Oftentimes in those days, families literally were torn apart.
I told my parents, because my grandfather on my mother's side, who I knew pretty well, he left Russia in 1914 to avoid having to go into the Tsar's army in World War I.
Oh, wow.
So that was the precedent. The precedent was set there.
Yeah.
And I told my mother, my parents, I wasn't, there's no way in heck I was going to Vietnam. And so I wound up, luckily, in the reserves. I was drafted 3 times. And I had a medical problem, which by the 3rd time was not enough to get me a disqualification because they were so short-handed. And so I walked into a reserve unit, and they used to go up to Camp Drum in upstate New York for 2 weeks every summer, and I made sure every time I went up there that I had a doctor's note saying I couldn't do any heavy lifting.
Alan,
you learn how to play the game.
Right.
Go to the movie every night, no matter how bad it is on post, because if you don't go, they can find you and give you some sort of assignment which you would rather not do. It became a game, what you could get away with, and I became pretty good at playing it.
Very good.
For civilian, 28 days
a year. You should have seen Ralph Tyko as an airman, second class.
And the reserves for 2 days a month, a weekend a month, and then the 2-week summer camp. And this was in the late 60s or 70s.
What were the weekend meetings like?
Yeah. Boring. You just try to stay out of everybody's way. I got to be because I could type 27 words a minute, I got to be a clerk typist for the commanding officer. So I got out of a lot of stuff because of that. But when we went up to the 2-week summer camp, there were guys in those days. I never did this. There were guys that go up with stashes of marijuana and hashish and whatever, and they were stoned the whole 2 weeks.
Well,
wow,
that'll happen.
Sometimes
it gets away from you.
That day and age,
more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks. It was a Saturday to a Saturday. We get home on the Saturday. I remember in 1973, I'm waiting for my brother to pick up. I'm standing there smiling. Somebody asked me why I was smiling. I says, because I'm never going to have to do this anymore.
Last time. I'm going to change the subject just a little bit, and because you mentioned marijuana and my mind works this way, I want to ask Bill Hall, Oregon, how the recent, for you guys, the recent legalization of pot, how that has affected the community in terms of finances, in terms of it all. What's the adjustment?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we have had legal medical marijuana for, I think, about 20 years now. At first, it was legalized for people to grow for themselves or for a small number of other folks. And then, within the last 10 years, we set up a dispensary system where people could go to a dispensary rather than having to grow for themselves. But it was just at the beginning of last year, so essentially we're now 1 year into legal recreational marijuana. And so far,
that's what California is doing now.
Yep, we followed Colorado and Washington. We're number 3, and I don't know, so far the state has taken in something like $52 million in tax revenue, which in a $15 billion biennial budget isn't huge, but it's not chump change either. And I don't think the sky has fallen, that there have been a few incidents of people, how can I say it, consuming irresponsibly, just as there are instances of people consuming alcohol irresponsibly. But I think most of the worst fears, which is not surprising, were overblown, and it's being integrated into society, not a big deal, frankly.
Good. Is it on the horizon in New York, from what you read and hear, legalization?
I just don't know enough about New York.
Actually, I wanted Alan.
I'm sorry, Alan. Okay.
I think eventually it'll happen here because, but there are an awful lot of elements that are against it. I think the anti-marijuana people have that attitude. Or experience. There are clusters of people that would like to take New York State back to the 1950s, but that's not going to happen. But the thing is that the state legislature here is so incredibly corrupt, and there's basically nothing can be done about it. And Albany, the capital where they meet, is a total cesspool. And right now you have the former Speaker
of the Assembly. Or as a group of folks meeting. What do you mean by that?
Former Speaker of the Assembly and the former head of the State Senate, both of them are out on appeal because they were both convicted of corruption. And they're out on a bail. They're out on not in jail yet because the courts allowed them to be free until the appeals were heard, which God knows how long that can take. Right. But they treat them. Anybody who goes up to Albany in a political office in the state legislature, they think that that they're prima donnas, and they can't pass anything that's that'll be of any value to most of the state. It's really, really bad.
Wow.
It's amazing how we've come to think of our politicians. And Socrates said that our leaders are no more than a representation of the people that they're leading. So I guess a lot of it is self-hatred because we're in a situation now where we're in uncharted waters as far as how things can get in the next 4, God forbid, 8 years. Do you have any predictions of how things are going to go? Bill, start with you.
Oh, gosh. Reading the tea leaves, it is so challenging. I'll just offer up one thing that I was actually in Washington for 3 days last week and talking to a lot of people. So here's something that might happen or very well might not, but a lot of people were predicting a 3-way split in government. And what I mean by that is, of course, Democrats are going to continue to chart their own course, but said, don't be surprised if the congressional Republicans and President Trump split. and sooner rather than later, because other than repealing Obamacare and tax cuts for the wealthy, there's not a lot of alignment in their program. And the latest polls show Trump's approval rating at something like 37%. And, the first goal of any member of Congress is to get reelected, and they're only going to be with him to the extent that they think it's beneficial to them. So, there could be some interesting fireworks this year. I'm sure there will be, but whether it's over that or something else, we'll just have to see.
I just want to say that whoever supports the abolishment of Planned Parenthood is going to take us right down the tubes. I mean,
well,
to my society, it's
my
what
feeling
separates
that,
us from third
Al and Ryan are very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan, right.
And these, in some ways, they scare me more than Trump does.
Yeah, because they understand where the levers to really move government are, and I don't think Trump does.
Did you say Pence and Ryan?
No, I said McConnell.
Oh, McConnell.
Well, you could throw Pence in there.
I'd throw Pence into that mix, too, because, again, some people say, let's impeach Trump, but...
Right, and then what do you get? Exactly.
I have a friend of mine that wants Trump out. I said, you get rid of him, you get Pence, you get Ryan, you get McConnell, and they're all ideologues.
Yep.
And I don't think McConnell's an ideologue. I think McConnell is a power mad, crazy man. I call McConnell the Lizard, and I call Ryan the Scarecrow. Those are my nicknames for them. And the whole thing to me is I don't like making predictions. I don't like making doing hypotheticals, but I basically tell people, I said, don't be surprised at anything that's said or done, because there is no bottom.
Yeah. I'm with you there.
That scares the heck out of me. Alan and I did a show the other day with Peter Golenbach, and he methodically listed the proposed cabinet members, who all can't be turned down. I mean, they're going to have to pick one or two and really go after him. But their belief systems used to be we were governed by millionaires, and that was horrible, because how could a millionaire represent Johnny Lunchbucket or his wife? No way. And now we're represented by billionaires. So we are getting to the point where it's very scary. I mean,
it is.
We're on a precipice of bad things happening.
And on a more important topic, Bill, I like your post on the Boys of Summer group very, very much. And
Thank you.
On the Gil Hodges, he is one of two from that era that I would love to see in the Hall of Fame. The other one, to me, is Minnie Minoso.
Oh, I'm with you there totally. I just felt so sad when, I was angriest the most about Gil getting passed over in 2014, but close second was seeing Minnie passed over as well. And I remember seeing one interview with him afterwards, and then, he passed away just a few months later, and some people said he died of old age, but I really think he died of a broken heart. I mean, here's a guy who gave his entire life to the game as a player, a coach, an ambassador, brought it nothing but honor, and, to pass him over, disgusting.
Yeah, one of the things that I used to be responsible for was giving obituaries of players who contributed at our Sabre regional meetings to either Hall of Famers or New York baseball, and I was able to do several of the Boys of Summer. The first Boys of Summer The one I did was Carl Ferrillo. I mean, didn't go back that far to Gil Hodges and Jackie Robinson. But when I did the Pee Wee Reese one, I said that one of the things I hated most about these stat heads, that's what I call the people who are obsessed by statistics, is that they take the human element out.
Exactly.
That's what they're interested. They reduce everything to a raw number. And you can't reduce Pee Wee Reese to a raw number. No.
What does leadership mean? What does the ability, you look at Jackie Robinson, there's a prime example of a guy whose impact truly transcended his statistics, the way that he put the other team constantly on edge, in fear. What's Robinson going to do now? My God, is he actually going to try and steal home? And if you think having somebody like Jackie Robinson on the bases doesn't disrupt a pitcher's concentration, then
absolutely does.
Yeah.
And Minnie Minoso was a lot like that. Minnie Minoso was an aggressive, fun to watch ball player. Reminds me of the '59 Cleveland Indians.
And one of the things, one of the great Carmen Barra stories is that she told us at a SABR meeting that we had up there a number of years ago in Montclair, New Jersey, that one time they were at an affair with Rachel Robinson, and Rachel Robinson asked Carmen whether she could have a dance with Yogi. So Carmen says yes. She calls Yogi over and says, whatever you do, you can have a dance with Rachel Robinson. Whatever you do not bring up that play in the '55 World Series.
Wow. We could have a whole hour sometime, I'm sure, just of Yogi stories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's my all-time favorite, so everything about him I'm pretty well versed on.
Oh, that'll be fun.
I came to, as I got older and older, and these guys started to get old, and I started appreciating the whole syndrome of the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Boys of Summer, pretty much, and I hope I contribute to that site, even though Bill, you're the only one that knows my secret.
And we won't share it.
Okay.
We'll keep it only to our listeners here.
Things change quite a bit when you get older and more see things more in perspective.
Yeah, well, maybe if we're in true confessional time, I ought to share something. I mean, I shared this when I had my conversation with Gil Hodges Jr., and he was forgiving of it. I told him that I actually grew up a Giants fan because being in Portland, Oregon, other than the 1 year that Seattle Pilots existed until I was off to college, I didn't have a Major League Baseball team closer to me than the San Francisco Giants. And he said, well, you grew up following the greatest there ever was, meaning Willie. And how can you argue with that? Well, I suppose a good Yankee fan will make the case for Mantle, but Willie was amazing.
Well, the thing is also the Giants, the last year in 1957 here, they finished sixth, and the only real assets they had were Willie Mays and Johnny Antonelli.
Right.
And all of a sudden they go out to San Francisco in 1958, and all of a sudden Orlando Cepeda is up, Jim Davenport is up, Felipe Alou is up. They brought up a whole bunch of rookies over the next 2 years and became basically a perennial contender. I believe that Stoneham held all these guys down, and not for 1957 because it made his exit out of New York. It made his exit out of New York easier.
I would think so. I've often wondered, the what ifs if those two teams had stayed. What the
Giants were going to move to Minneapolis.
Yeah, that's true.
That was what that ballpark, the first ballpark. Major League ballpark that the Twins used was originally built for the Giants.
True.
But the Dodgers, that's how the Dodgers got the Giants to move to California. They had territorial rights because they had a farm club in Minneapolis. St. Paul. So they basically coerced Stoneham to move to San Francisco. And you know what? If they had built a stadium that they didn't have to tear down a hill that was preventing the wind from coming in to build the stadium, and if the heaters worked, they put heaters in under the seats because it was absolutely frigid at night in San Francisco. I think Stoneham would have done better for himself. As it turns out, the franchise is miraculous. They finally got a gem of a ballpark built, and but it didn't work out well for Horace. He basically was bankrupt when he sold the team. He was certainly bankrupt to the point of having to sell Willie to the Mets in, I think it was 70, not sell, but they traded him for Charlie. They traded him for Charlie Williams, a nondescript pitcher.
That was, yeah.
Was it 72? Okay.
Yeah. Early in the 72 season.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember it well.
After the year of the Fox in 1971. And if you can get me on a list, I'd like to do Charlie Fox's story for Sabre. I'd like to do the research on that. If you can get me signed up, show me how to sign up for that, Bill Hall.
Okay, I'll be in touch. I'll look into that and see what you need to do.
Beautiful, because Willie was still Willie in 71, and even when they traded him, there's all the talk about he was, kind of washed up, over the hill this, over the hill that. He was the best athlete on the Mets at that time.
Oh, yeah. No question.
When he came back here, they expected to see the Willie 50s, and it wasn't quite like that.
Wasn't quite like that, but he had his moments, and one of the moments, he hit a home run in his first game. As a Met against the Giants.
For years, I had pinned to my bedroom wall, that would have been my junior high years, a 2-page spread from Life magazine. The heading was Willie Forever. There was a big picture of him hitting that game-winning home run against the Giants, and it was surrounded by pictures of every one of Willie's Topps baseball cards.
They reprinted 1997. Topps reprinted all their cards of Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, and Henry Aaron. I can't pass the early ones off as real because they're smaller than the original part. But I was hoping that they would do the same thing for Yogi Berra. The only other one I think they did that for was Roberto Clemente.
Oh, wow.
Right. And, I just mentioned we're talking about Minnie Minoso literally dying of a broken heart. Same thing was true with Buck O'Neill.
Oh, yeah.
My opinion, when they did not put him in the Hall of Fame, that was horrible. And he too was an ambassador of the game. He was the first black coach in baseball. He coached with the Cubs.
And he was the only talking head on that Ken Burns documentary that I could actually listen to.
Yeah, and and I know you guys, I'm sure, remember, but maybe not everybody listening does, how they set up that special Negro Leagues Review Committee, and everybody said, okay, this is the committee that's guaranteed to get Buck in, and then they come forward with a list of 17 names, and Buck's not on it. And everybody, I think, from coast to coast, you could almost hear the groan. What?
I'm on
the Hall of Fame named an award after him, but oh my God!
I'm on a Negro League site on Facebook, and every time they put up a picture of either Buck O'Neill or Minnie Minoso, I said should have been in the Hall of Fame years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a thing. People should just get another Hall of Fame. I mean, it's not owned by baseball. the Fair Persons Hall of Fame or something. They just put together another museum. You put do it right, but that's not going to be done, and that's it's a travesty. Life sometimes is just that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Hey, time has got us backed up a little bit. I think this was a perfect first edition. I'm glad you guys are considering doing this on a regular basis. And either way, thank you for coming back to the zone, Bill Hall.
Always a lot of fun.
It really is. I just so much enjoy your company. Alan Blumkin, what can I say? You're the Tommy Heinrich, old reliable of Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I'm so happy to have you guys both associated with Comfortably Zoned. And I'm proud.
A pleasure.
And for those of you out there, hope you enjoyed. It's a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production, coast to coast. Bill Hall and Alan Blumkin, or if you will,
very nice
Blumkin and Bill Hall.
First time.
We're going to have a big fight about that. You guys
Okay.
such egos. I can't keep your egos down. That's
very good.
All right. Talk soon, everybody.
Okay.
Be well.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was fun. Okay. Bye-bye.
I enjoyed it.